Welcome to the Black on Shelf podcast, a podcast championing Black and Brown entrepreneurs on the digital and physical shelves. I'm your host, Tanaj Ferguson. This is Black on Shelf. So, Margaret, I'm so excited to have you on. I love to start the podcast with sharing my product discovery moment with the brand. And for me, I remember it being during COVID time, hearing about this first Black-owned brand available at Trader Joe's. And I was like, who is this person? What is this brand? I need to support it. And I found out about Kahawa, 1893, your brand. So I really would love for us to share with the Boss Fam a little bit about your background. Before the podcast, we talked about how I already felt, that I really resonated with you. I'm born and raised Bahamian. You are Kenyan. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how you got to this point.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Kenya. I grew up on a coffee farm, my grandfather's coffee farm that's been in the family now for 3 generations.
Wow.
And growing up, this is actually, if you look behind me, you'll see the coffee cherries on a tree. They are actually a fruit. And so growing up, we would play in the coffee fields and pick up the berries and eat them. And you'd have so much energy and just play forever.
Yes.
But so grew up around there and then moved to the US for college. I didn't have any specific plans of returning to coffee. So for many reasons. But I actually found myself being drawn back into coffee after business school. So I did HBS, and then I went to work
HBS,
on Wall Street.
The Harvard Business School. For those that don't know, she's being humble. Margaret went to Harvard Business School. Yes.
So after business school, I went to work on Wall Street, which is a typical post MBA career path.
Right.
And when I was on Wall Street, it's when I kind of developed an interest in coffee. At about the same time, there was an explosion of specialty coffee. And Kenya is actually considered the best coffee in the world, but if you ask coffee connoisseurs.
Okay.
So there was a lot of interest in coffee that was coming from Africa in particular, but there wasn't an actual African-owned brand or Africa-led brand, which is, it's really interesting if you think about it, France not having wine or, Italy not having a pasta brand.
Right.
So if you think along those lines, it's that Africa produces the best coffee in the world, but there wasn't a brand that was dedicated to telling the special origins of coffee in Ethiopia, which is where coffee originated, and really telling that story of who's really powering the coffee industry, which is the women farmers on the ground. Yeah. So I got drawn back into it on the weekend, started experimenting with, different coffee shops and learning more and more about it. And, started the brand out in New York and then moved out to San Francisco, where we've been growing the brand out of.
So I have so many questions for you. I want to go back to your childhood since we're on the origin, since we're around and parts of the origin story segment. So what is it like growing up on a coffee farm? You alluded to having reasons for why you didn't, and this makes sense. Most family, if your family owns a restaurant, you either really want to own the restaurant or you're like, get me away from anything food and restaurant, right? So talk about your coffee farm experience. Yeah. And even to the point of what does most of us, we talked about this before the podcast, but most of us are used to tasting coffee and seeing the bean, but we never, for those on the podcast who can't see, the coffee fruit is bright red, it's beautiful. Watch the audio, the visual podcast on audio. Watch the visual podcast on YouTube to go see or Google coffee fruit, but you can see it's vibrant behind Margaret. I'm curious what that tastes like. So talk to us about what it was like growing up on a coffee farm. What were some of the tasks you had to do, things that had to be done, activities? What does it taste like? Does the whole fruit energize you? Give us a little bit more on that day-to-day experience.
Yeah, so just funny anecdote. Like you said, when you grow up, you either want to become your parents or the opposite of them. So because my parents were farmers and entrepreneurs, they were very adamant about me going to school and sort of getting a professional desk job. They were very, they talked a lot about how entrepreneurship was precarious. As you know, in Africa, it can be very precarious, anywhere in the world, really. So they were very, very adamant about me going to school, getting an education, which I did. Yeah. And so for them, when I, got drawn back into coffee, it was very, very surprising for them. But I think for me, I really have good memories of growing up on the farm. Again, the coffee cherry, it's almost like a cherry. And what we do process is the seed, which is inside of the cherry.
So around it is fleshy?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a flesh that you can eat like you would eat a cherry, and then there's a seed in the middle. So what gets processed is the seed, which is a tiny part of it. A lot of it is
the coffee bean.
Yes, the bean is what gets processed, but most of the cherry gets thrown out. It's not
is it like fertilizer?
It becomes fertilizer.
Okay.
At the moment, people are trying to make things with it. People are trying
I think there's a juice, the coffee fruit based juice I've seen on the market.
Cascara, which is
cascara root, okay.
As well.
Is that the alcohol, cascara? They've turned into
it's like a tea. It's like
a tea, okay.
Yeah, it's essentially the cover, the outside cover of the fruit dried. So it's almost like, apple skins or something. The outer part dried. So there's, more products are starting to be made from parts of the fruit. But, as a child, what we would normally kind of help with is sort of like picking the berries. And because coffee actually grows on slopes, it grows at high altitude. And our essentially our land or our village is it's very hilly. It's actually very similar to San Francisco. It's very slopey. Yeah. So coffee loves to grow up high in the mountains. So you kind of trek up in the mountains and then come back. And I think one thing I remember very vividly was the farmers would wake up really early, 6 a.m. before the sun's out, because you essentially want to pick the coffee and be down before 10 a.m. Before the sun comes out, because as soon as the sun comes out, it starts to ferment.
Okay.
And you don't want the coffee fermenting before it gets processed.
Right.
So it's actually very delicate in terms of like the time frame, like between when you pick it and before you process it. If you wait too long, then you can't really use it.
It'll be spoiled.
Yeah. So it's very time sensitive. Once you pick it, you got to process the same day.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And you gave us a good bit about history, and I think we don't always hear this, but Ethiopian coffee being really the birthplace of what we know as coffee today. Share what you know of that origin story and how that sort of transitioned over into Kenya, and Kenya having such high quality coffee. Is this a key trade for Kenya still today beyond your operations?
Yeah, so Kenya is known, and that's part of the reason we're named Kahawa 1893. So Kahawa means coffee in Swahili. It's derived from kave. Kave is the original name for coffee in Ethiopia. When coffee was discovered, I think it was around the 12th to 13th century. And it was the story or the myth is that there was a goat herder who was herding goats, and then the goats were eating up the berries, and then they were very jumpy and energetic. And so that's how they discovered that there's something about this tree and this fruit. And then it actually got commercialized in Yemen. So in the Middle East is where it got commercialized, and then moved to Europe, and then Europeans brought it to Latin America. Okay. And then it was in 1893 that coffee returned back to Africa to be processed commercially. And that's why, Kenya and Ethiopia share a border. So in fact, even in Kenya, there's a lot of Ethiopian tribes because, the borders are sort of arbitrary.
Yes.
They were kind of constructed. So where we consider Kenya right now was, traditionally it had no border between that and Ethiopia. It's the same region.
Right.
So that's the original place, which means that we have a sort of, that area has a natural habitat for coffee. So coffee grows quite easily there and grows really well. And so we couple that with processing it in a very special way. We have this method of processing. It's called double fermentation.
Okay.
This is something that farmers have learned over time. They've preserved it, and it just consistently produces the best coffee in the world. Even though nationally we produce only 1%, or rather globally we produce only 1% of all coffee. So it's very small and declining. So it's really becoming a challenge to keep farmers on because of low prices. But that's part of the reason why it's so important, for us to raise the profile and introduce people to Kahawa and the mission.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that as well. So you talked to us, you ended your background on being on Wall Street, on testing coffee. Now, while you were working or even in college, were you able to get coffee from your family's coffee farm? Where would you get your coffee? We're curious to know where the coffee girl gets her coffee.
Oh my God, I know, right? So when I was in college, I just had coffee, like, in the school, they always had the bulk coffee that they produce. That's why I had coffee, and would sometimes get coffee in a coffee shop, in downtown. But I wasn't much of a coffee drinker in a way, because in Kenya, we drink tea.
Okay.
And that's another part of history, is that even though Kenya was producing coffee, we were not allowed to drink it. It was strictly for export.
Oh.
Yes. So it was illegal to drink coffee until I think the 80s is when they released it. So there was this because coffee was too valuable. We were colonized by the British.
Right.
So they were like, here, drink tea. So they would get tea from India and then be like, drink this tea, but all coffee has to go abroad. So there was a culture again of sort of exporting the coffee to, and then when I came to the US, I was like, oh, this is where the coffee comes to. So I was drinking. And then when I was, when I moved to work in New York, I was kind of surprised that I couldn't find Kenyan coffee easily. Part of that is because, again, there isn't a lot of it in the world.
1% of the world's coffee.
Yeah, it's only 1%. It's the most expensive coffee. So it's not found everywhere. It's only found in like places.
It's premium. That's why.
It's premium, yeah. So it's not found everywhere. So you have to find it like in very specific places, and people didn't know where to find it. But now with Kahawa, it's really part of the reason we exist is so that we can be advocates and evangelists for.
Make it accessible.
Making it accessible. Yeah.
So are you a coffee snob, and what did US coffee taste like compared to Kenyan coffee?
Oh, yeah. I'm quite the snob. But it's because it's when you discover the taste. So it's just when I was like drinking that coffee in college, or coffee that you'd get at like a major chain, you'd have to drain it in sugar and milk. To like drown out the bitterness.
Yes.
And then this coffee from Kenya is so sweet. You don't actually need anything. You can drink it straight up. It's healthy. Can you imagine?
And black coffee is my favorite. Like that's what I do.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So it's really, it's just like it's a different product altogether. So I think that part of it is like exposing more people to just like how precious African coffee is.
Yeah. I'm curious too, you mentioned the fruit itself. Is there a reason why more people, grapes are sold in the store, the fruits, I've never seen coffee fruit available in its raw form. And I know maybe part of that might be because the coffee bean industry is so well developed and we're always trying to get to the bean. But what has been your experience in Kenya growing up with people eating the whole fruit itself?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But I think so with grapes is because they're produced here in California, though now there's actually starting to be some coffee production in California. So it's starting. So we don't know. In a few years, there might be more coffee being sold out. So I think it's the distance, because coffee is produced in tropical countries. so you can't really transport it.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually just yesterday was at Trader Joe's and I got the coffee tree. They were selling the coffee tree. So I just got some coffee trees that I'm now like planting in my
Ah,
in my balcony. So I'm excited to see how
cool.
they turn out. Yeah. So that was
Yeah.
surprising.
Yeah, that is surprising. So you find yourself on Wall Street. You're starting to test coffee on the weekends. What happens next? How does this brand evolve and you start to feel like you can actually create a brand from your idea?
So what happened was I found a mentor. It was, during one of my tastings and tours of City Coffee, I found someone that had been in the business since the 80s. They helped Starbucks open their first or their third store in Seattle.
Oh, wow.
So they've been in the business for a long time. And when I told them about sort of my background and my, connection to Kenya, they were pretty excited about what we're doing because again, Kenyan coffee is very special in the coffee community. So he was very, very excited about kind of taking me under his leadership and showing me the ropes. And he was very adamant about me starting my own brand as a way to really understand the coffee industry. You just learn so much.
You're right.
Than starting any other place. So it was a crash course, but it helped to have someone that had done it several times and that was a willing mentor for me.
Yeah, that's so important. We always talk about how, mentorship in entrepreneurship is such a time saver and such a anchor to making sure your idea actually goes forward and has the least amount of pain points, right? When you have someone who can help you navigate, you avoid certain things. That's really great that you found that mentor with so much experience.
It definitely helps, especially in developed markets such as coffee, where things have been done before. So there's no need to make the same mistakes over and over again. So having someone to guide you through the process is definitely, and that's something I always offer new people coming into the scene. I'm always happy to mentor new brands that are coming through because even now, being in the business for over 4 years, I know so much more than I did just 2-3 years ago. And you really just have to do it. You have to make some mistakes, but other mistakes are too expensive to make. Yeah.
So, you find your mentor. What do you do next to materialize this business?
So the next thing was, again, coffee is a little bit different than some other more complicated products because coffee is just one product. It's actually just one thing. That's it. Then you roast it,
Differently,
package it. Yeah, there's no mixing. There's actually like not that much complexity versus I was thinking of essentially how you would, do like a shea butter or some other products that need a lot of like mixing, or I was watching mac and cheese, that something that needs like frozen.
Yes.
So coffee in itself is actually a simpler product. So I don't want to downplay all the other efforts that would be needed for a regular brand. The only difference between coffee and I think some other brands or some other industries is it's very competitive because it's so easy. Anyone can do it. So it's a very competitive space. So a lot of the work there is in sort of figuring out your reason for existing, your why. So I would say that's
the supply chain. When you think of Kenyan coffee being difficult in some ways, it's a challenging market. How do you make sure you get a share of that 1% that's available in Kenya? Isn't that somewhat competitive from a maybe sourcing and supply chain standpoint? What is that? What does the market landscape look like on that end? Is it something that folks still don't know enough about? So there's not that much there hadn't at the time been that much competition?
No, I think it comes down, and it's actually one of the most challenging things to do. I just had the unfair advantage of
right.
sort of being from there and having the relationship.
Love
so
that.
Like I have my family's farm. We had farmers that we knew that were part of a cooperative.
Okay.
So for me, I was already a member of the community.
Yes.
So it was an easy sell versus if I was a stranger going to a new country, trying to source, it would be harder to build that trust.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a matter of making calls and showing up, and it's like, I'm back to get coffee, and people are like, okay, cool.
What was your community's reaction to you saying, hey, I need coffee, I'm building a brand? What was their reaction?
They were pretty excited about it. I mean, it's kind of well known that, you know, coffee pricing is pretty bad in the international market. So the coffee prices are below cost of production. The way that I describe it to people is that, you know, farmers actually donate their coffee to the market.
Oh my gosh.
So in this case, it was a matter of sort of showing up, you know, and you know, and kind of offering fair pricing.
Yeah. So that is one of the key differences of your brand, and one of the tenets that I so admire about your brand. Like on the website, you can tip a farmer. I love that. Also, talk to us about how you empower women. That was another point that really blew me out the water. That in Kenya, was it something like 90% of the coffee is sourced by women?
Yeah.
Talk to us more about that landscape when it comes to who is sourcing the coffee and how that's different from maybe other places within the industry.
So the way the rest of the industry usually works is that the coffee, you know, gets consolidated, and then, you know, just it's a commodity. It's like you're buying, you know, it just gets consolidated. It's like you're buying a pack of water at the grocery store. You know, it doesn't matter which stream or river it came from, it's water, right? So that's literally how the coffee industry works. And so the farmers usually would give up their crop and then expect, sometimes it would take 6 months for them to get their pay, whatever the market price is. And the price just happens to be below cost of production for a very long time. Like always, like forever. Part of that is, I mean, you've been to business school, so you kind of understand. Part of it is just the economics of coffee are very, very complex, because Brazil is the largest producer, produces about 40%. Vietnam produces another 20%. So those are the only two countries that control the price of coffee because they produce so much. So everyone else is kind of, they're following price taker. They have zero control over it. So like right now there's a drought in Brazil, and that's kind of moving prices a little bit. But yeah, so other countries are just kind of like, okay, this is the price. In Brazil is also, those two countries are also the most efficient producers. So they produce at the lowest cost. So their cost of production becomes what's imposed on everyone else, even though all other countries, it's more expensive to produce. So that's really what the situation is. But so the way that we approached it is, again, we can't really impact the prices in the global market. They're set by Wall Street. They just, you know, it's economics. It's the free markets. We can't impact it directly. So for me, when I was thinking, okay, what can I do as a brand, right? And as a brand, I was thinking I can impact the women directly. So first, the setup is you have the women doing most of the work on the farm. And that's also structural because, again, it's mostly unpaid work. So it falls on the women. So the women are doing most of the work.
So they're picking coffee fruit.
Yes, they're picking the fruit, they're processing it, they're taking care of the plants all year. But then when the payments come, they go to the men because the men own the land.
Okay.
So I was thinking, okay, how can we get the women paid? Because women, again, still are the ones who are taking care of the household. As well. And so initially we started off with a women's fund, and we would give a share of our profits into that fund, and it would support the women who were part of that fund. We started off with 25 women, and then it started growing. And now we were saying, okay, instead of just doing profits, what if we invited consumers to also contribute to that fund? And now when you tip directly into that fund, we match it 100%. And so yeah, I know, it's really cool. And so what's been interesting about the way we've approached it is through empowerment. And the reason I stress empowerment over anything else, it's that you want to give women the power to essentially determine their own lives and end the cycle of poverty. You want to make sure that they have the means to take care of their most immediate needs. And then invest in the future. So there's this, because the cycle of poverty, a lot of it is you're not thinking about the future, you're thinking about tomorrow.
Right.
And so what's been so interesting is because since we started, we've been able to take care of their smaller needs. One of the women has built a house. They used to live in a mud house. One of the women has taken their kids to school. One of the women has taken care of a sick family member. So they're telling me these stories of what they've been able to invest in with the proceeds so far. And now they're at a stage where they've gone beyond basic needs. You have food on your table, you have a roof under your head, your family is secure. Now you can actually think about investing. And now they're investing in a maize meal. So in Kenya, the most common food is a maize meal. It's that maize has to be processed. And there wasn't
like corn, right?
Like corn, yeah. There wasn't a corn processor nearby. And so they used to have to travel long distances. Again, that's another thing about a lot of the other thing about women productivity is they spend a lot of time walking long distances to get water, to get firewood, to process corn. And now they're investing in the fast machine that will be closer to them, so they spend less time traveling to one. And then they actually now will make an income because they can service a whole community. They can employ people, and now they can actually start to invest because they're more secure, meaning that they can predict their revenues versus not knowing when the next donation is coming.
That's such a big deal. Like we all, like in North America, a lot of people have a dishwasher, a washing machine, a car. These are things that literally will save you so much time and thereby give you more energy or free up your time to spend with family or, doing another job. And when we think of that simple thing and we think about how that's an example of time efficiencies for them and their families, not having to walk 10 miles for water. Yes. You have a lot more time in your day to spend with your kids, to relax, to think of a business plan, to live, I
know, to invest in the future. And for me, even when we think about climate change, and I don't know if you've seen the study that showed that apart from fossil fuels, gender inequality was the biggest influence on our war on climate change. And the reason for that is because
tell me.
Yeah, because women are like at the forefront of a lot of activities that influence climate change. And so if we don't invest in them, because they're the ones who are at the forefront, so if we don't invest in them so that they actually have the resources to counter the effects, then we're slowing down some of that progress. So once we do fossil fuels, investing in gender equality is actually the next step. And so this is an example of how we're thinking of coffee as a tool for empowerment.
Definitely. I see it. What's amazing to me is that you didn't just focus so much on just the product itself. You really said, I need to take it so much deeper in order for this to be sustainable, differentiated, unique. You really built a true brand and created a true story that is impactful, that's powerful. I've not heard that in coffee. I really have not heard that in coffee. And I get the feel good feels. And I'm like, now if I have a choice to make and all the coffee is good, Kenyan coffee is better. But even on top of that, I'm helping a community I care about, but I don't have a way on my own to influence and impact. And your brand is able to do that. That's amazing. It really is.
Definitely.
Well, how does that make you feel when you were able to land on such a great solution? How does that make you and even your family feel being able to influence a community you are a part of?
I think at the beginning, when you're starting out, you're kind of not sure. For me, it was, you want to change one person's life at a time. So the long view is, every journey starts with a single step. So start by impacting one person, and then over time it compounds. And so now we're seeing that compound effect, and it's really satisfying to watch, and especially talk to the women. And for us, sometimes we think, what is $10, right? What is $20? But for people that are living on less than $1 a day, $20 is transformative. So that's part of like the the part of the message that I hope to pass to people along is like, a dollar might seem like a, drop in the bucket, but it can change someone's life. So I'm just, the compounding nature of it is, it's like finance or money. It's like when you see it compound like 10, 30 years from now, you're like, wow, I can't believe that was the dollar from,
Yeah.
that I almost threw on the ground.
I know.
Now become $1,000. So it's
Absolutely.
the same effect where you impact one woman and then they have such a profound impact on a generation as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a great thing when you're not only influencing your own wealth, but you're actually also creating wealth for a number of other people. So that also is such a big deal to know that you get to, it's pressure as well. In a good way, keeps you on your toes to continue to serve these folks and create opportunity, so that they and their families continue to succeed.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's pressure, because you're like, okay, you started this journey, and that's why the empowerment part is really interesting, because it's about sustainable. So you get people to a point where they have a footing, and they can sustain themselves. To me, that's so important versus sort of one-offs.
Yeah.
As well.
I read that you were also using blockchain to help the farmers to earn a fair wage. Talk to us about what is that? It's a big word. We've heard blockchain technology a number of places. How are you actionably integrating this technology to enable the fair wages that we've been talking about?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We get that question a lot. So we did a pilot, I think, way back in 2019, and Forbes actually wrote about it. We partnered with a blockchain company to do traceability. And so the benefit of blockchain is that you could essentially, you can store information there, and it goes back to trust, right? Where if if a brand says we are, fair trade, or we paid this price, or we did X, there's no way to verify it, right? And the blockchain was kind of starting to introduce a way that we can input information, and that information becomes sort of permanent, where you can check records easily. So that was like one of the applications that I was very, very excited about. It's sort of a modern way of doing fair trade. And the second,
without having to pay for a fair trade stamp or approval.
Yes. And then it integrated with the tipping part, right? So as a consumer, you can check kind of the transparency back to the farmer, and that you can trust that information is intact, in a way that you can't now. And then the next thing was the financial side. So the other interesting thing about blockchain is the digital currency part. And so think about when you go to a coffee shop and you buy, like, say you spend $3 or $4 on coffee, and then you tip the barista $1. And then, so what if for each dollar, 20 cents could go back to the farmer? The reason it's not possible today is because doing cross-border transactions is very expensive. It's actually impossible at that small range. But what if the world had a single currency, right, where there are no borders? And that's what blockchain gives us, the idea of sort of borderless transactions. And so that was the application of people being able to do microtransactions in small amounts, and being able to do cross-border. And so we started off with that concept. And now we actually do have on our website, we've partnered with a financial company, blockchain enabled company, that where you can still tip with cryptocurrency as well.
Oh, okay. I immediately, when you talked about that crypto, I thought Dogecoin.
I know.
Those are becoming so much more popular, right?
Yeah. So I'm very, very excited about the applications that we can use blockchain for. That's something that we're always experimenting. But I truly believe that, we really haven't applied tech to the benefit of farmers in the way that we've used it to improve the rest of other parts of the, supply chain. We can brew better coffee. We can, we have a lot of fancy tools to brew, fancy tools to do things, but we haven't really used tech to improve sort of the farming side. So I'm very excited. As we grow, I'm very excited to really use that more and more, like bring more of that tech adoption in-house.
Yeah, that's super smart. And I think,
Yeah.
that's really where you're also going to be able to compete further. What if, more competition comes in? You're now able to have this long established record of trust, of traceability. And you really, those intangibles like that, they don't go lost on the consumer when you're able to back up what you are doing. So many brands that we use today, you trust them just because of an ad, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of marketing. But at the same time, consumers get super smart and have, there are times when they want to know every living thing about something. We saw that even during the Black Lives Matter. Consumers wanted to know who is behind this company. How can we get more diverse people working and integrated? Is it authentic? We were picking apart a number of things. So there are points in time where we're like, nope, I don't care what the status quo is. I want to know what's actually happening. And you've already got that embedded into what the foundation of your business. And this is year 4 for you. And you've made that choice. You've made that choice. You could have done a lot of other choices and not let that one be the most important, one of the most important things, but you did prioritize that. What's the reason why you did prioritize that early on in the development of this company?
I mean, that's the reason we exist, because you could drink any coffee, but, if we were just to set up a coffee, company selling coffee, I'm not passionate about that.
Right.
And that's the thing about entrepreneurship is you can't do something that you're not passionate about for too long, because you encounter a lot of obstacles along the way and you sort of give up already. So for me, it's really about the impact and, what we can have on the ground that fuels me. So without that, then I don't know why I would sell coffee. I'd rather still be in financial services and like sell money instead of coffee.
I hear you.
And then, and part of it is the way that I see it from the perspective, like you've talked about, it's how do we make it easy for people to do good? So we don't want people to become experts in supply chain or critical race theory to purchase something. It's like, how do we make this process easier again? So a lot of places are overserved with tech, and I feel like we are underserved with tech. Places that we can use tech as an equalizer, we are underserved. So how can we bring those talents that we've used in other areas that are overserved to underserved areas?
Got you. So I love your mission. I'm curious to hear, what were some of the milestones that you've had in your 4 years of doing business? What were some of the business milestones?
I think a first milestone, as any brand, you get excited for the first time you get on the shelf.
Yeah. I was hoping you would say that.
Our first place that we actually got on the shelf was still, selling there. It's a cooperative in Brooklyn. It's called Pax.coop.
Okay.
It's a members only co-op, but that was like the first place go on the shelf, and we still, sell out there. So very, very excited. And then when we moved to San Francisco, our first, cooperative that we also sold at was called Rainbow Grocery. Oh, yes. And we're still selling there. So just, that was like a big milestone at the time. You were like, this is just like our first store. But I didn't realize that 4 years later, we would still be in that store and just having regular customers enjoying our coffee. Mm-hmm. So that was, for me, was a big milestone.
Yeah.
The second milestone was obviously when we essentially transitioned. So we used to sell a lot to offices. So we've served some of the bigger tech companies here, Facebook, Twitter, in the Bay Area. So we did a lot of office work. But when the pandemic hit, we were just like, okay, what are we going to do? Because, we hadn't really developed our direct-to-consumer brand as much because we were doing B2B. So another milestone was pivoting from B2B to doing direct-to-consumer.
Oh, yes. That's a big pivot.
Yeah. So that was another milestone of sort of growing our subscription online and really serving consumer market. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, that was a good thing because it's by growing the brand that we now have the opportunity to go into big box retail.
Yeah.
And so we launched in Trader Joe's a few months ago, and
Yeah.
we'll be launching. I know, exciting.
Yes.
And then we'll be launching in Target
Yeah.
soon. So that's so exciting. So it's
Okay, we definitely have to stay on top of this so that we can support you really strong on Target. Listen, my Target tribe, we got you covered. Okay, we got you covered.
cool, exciting. Yeah, so we'll be very, very soon Target, and then just the usual, expansion in stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your pivot from B2B to B2C, I want to lean into that a bit more because it is big. And, when you first start entrepreneurship, you make decisions on what channels you're going to serve. You guys decided to do B2B and literally more so do food service approach. Talk to me about why that was the first channel decision you made.
It was, I think, a location thing. I think being in the Bay Area, which in a way lent itself to companies that were essentially already serving specialty coffee, which is unusual because office coffee is usually not specialty coffee.
Right.
So this was unusual that we were in a location that was welcoming of that, and also being very thoughtful about sourcing, which is, again, the Bay Area is where this movement of farm to table started.
Yeah.
So that's something that people are very, very keen about. So that was one. And the second thing was, when you're small, you don't have a lot of resources. And I was the only salesperson. And so it was more efficient for me to sell B2B than to sell direct.
Yeah,
at the time.
That's practical, right? It was
that. It was practical at the time, because then you're able to get more volume for the size of the sales force that you have.
Yeah, and then you don't necessarily have to talk to consumers about who you are. You just have to convince the buyer, whoever is buying the product for that operation. Pre-COVID, would you have still been on that B2B path? That was supposed to be the plan?
I think that was a sort of a temporary measure, I would say. Okay. I think it was go to market. I would think of it as like first step to just kind of a market entry tactic, as opposed to I think we'd always wanted to do a consumer brand.
Okay.
I would say that was just a market entry tactic.
Yeah. And then were you selling direct consumer on your website at that point, or it's just literally solely to those?
Oh no, we were, but it was smaller.
It was small, right? Because awareness, you
yes,
you build a website. You will build a website. Folks are not necessarily typing in Kenyan.
Yeah, they don't know you exist.
They don't know you exist yet.
Yeah. So you do need, and when you're new, you do need. You would know this more than anyone else.
Yes, that awareness.
You need a lot of things you need awareness.
You need a demand.
You need a budget. You need a lot of other things working
Absolutely.
well. To do that. Yeah.
Okay. So you pivot to B2C, and what are some of the key things that were different for you in that transition? Your bulk packaging is going to be different than your consumer packaging. Maybe even your portfolio might evolve a little bit for consumers. Tell me some of the key things that you had to kind of pivot through from a product and brand standpoint.
You got it. I think that was the first thing we did. We changed the brand. We changed the brand packaging. So
also the packaging is beautiful.
Thank you.
So attractive and appealing. I love it.
When we were doing B2B, we had sort of more understated. We had a black or a white. I think it was a white bag with it was like a mono color, and we felt like it wasn't really kind of communicating the nature of the product. It wasn't bringing out sort of this African origin, vibrant colors, African landscape,
Kenyan, colorful, Afrocentric. Yes.
Yeah. So I felt like that was one of the things that we immediately wanted to communicate through our packaging and brand identity.
Yeah. No, great job on that. I love it.
Thank you.
What are some of the key myths that you experience or misconceptions that you sort of tackled and experienced while you were transitioning during that time, or what that you learned from actually being in direct to consumer, talking to that consumer directly, connecting with retailers and trying to get those different shelf slots? What were some of those things you learned through the process, maybe that were surprising to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique time though, because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of changes. So we were, in a way, everything was moving online. Nothing was usual, nothing was normal.
Yeah,
Retailers were
nothing was
not.
normal.
Retailers were not doing anything normal. I don't think they were doing meetings or anything like
Right.
that. Everything was moving rapidly online. There was a lot of shortages of things.
Yeah.
Ports were backed up. Import was crazy. So it was an interesting period of time that I don't know if it's like the right period to like draw huge conclusions from. But I think one of the myths that I think the whole process, for me crashed was this idea that you need to have done it before, that you need that there's a correct way of doing things. So because of the pandemic, everything kind of blew up in a way that no one knew what was normal versus what was like a patch solution. So it created a lot of opportunities for creativity.
Yes.
And so for me, there were playbooks, but those playbooks no longer worked. So for me, that was eye-opening in a way that we could, essentially be creative in how we approach new opportunities, and just because nothing was traditional anymore. And I think that's been a lesson broadly out of the pandemic for everyone, is that nothing is, stuck in stone. Nothing is set in stone. Anything can change at any time. And also, just the awakening that happened with the Black Lives Matter, just reevaluating our priorities in general.
What was consumers' response during that time? I've talked to a number of entrepreneurs, and during this time, it was bittersweet, and we all mourning what was going on in the world during that time.
Yeah.
And you guys as businesses were flourishing in a number of ways, doors opening. What was the consumer response and retail response to your brand during this time? Maybe more visibility. Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, so I would say that was a time that we got a lot of visibility as well, because people were doing lists of Black-owned businesses. Consumers were seeking us out, which has always been sort of this chicken and egg problem with retail, right? And I think we hear it mostly in Hollywood, but it's the same things. I'm going to use that Hollywood analogy where they're saying, we won't produce Black movies, or we won't produce minority-led movies because there's no market for them, right? And that's how we kind of keep the status quo. When you think about retail, it's the same. Retailers will not invest or will not put Black-owned brands on their shelves because they're saying there's no demand for it. And then when we actually do put them on the shelf, there's outsized demand. So that there was, I think it was a realization moment for reckoning in a way, but also it was a good time for retailers to reevaluate how they could have an impact.
And be proven wrong, because I think by now that's a myth that can go all the way in the trash and be burned. We totally, if you make a compelling product that's relevant and resonates with the demand state that we need, we definitely buy. If the product is visible in store, totally meets our needs, we're buying it. So it's all about brands that talk to us and brands that meet some of our unique needs.
It was always, and it was
brands
always
that speak to a heritage that some of us have, provides products that we don't have access to. All of these opportunities that are not currently on the shelf, those are ones we're looking out for all the time.
Yeah, so I think it's created, it was an extra push, because I think before then it was like a status quo, like why mess with what's working? And this was an opportunity to shake things up a little bit. And then I think shaking it, making realize actually there is demand for that. So I think it's been bittersweet in a way, because, it's just the events of it are still very painful. But just seeing how that moment, it felt a lot like the 60s in a way. but I mean, I wasn't there, but what I imagined the 60s,
Right.
what I imagined the 60s were,
Right.
kind of moment of reckoning and,
Reckoning for
things.
sure. Did you have product supply challenges seeing that you are getting your beans from Kenya coming into the US?
So we had some like challenges at the port, I would say, because of the ports are backed up in general because we're importing a lot of things, and there was like that ship that was stuck in the canal in Egypt. And the people were just ordering more. I think there's just more demand because we're at home and we're like,
home.
okay, like I don't need it, but like, what am I doing? I want it.
I need to turn my home into an oasis. I'm spending so much time here. Order everything.
Yeah. And we don't spend money anymore because we're like, we don't go to the bar. We don't go. We're not traveling.
We're not
right? Tickets, no new outfits.
Not even driving, really.
So people are just buying things that that normally they would have been spending on experiences. So that a lot of physical things were stuck at the port. So they were like, where to fly in, like packaging instead of a bit more expensive than usual right now to do business, I would say that. And you're gonna see some inflation happening.
Yes.
Just because things are just taking a bit longer. There's low capacity in general. It's a unique time again, I think, for us to be expanding because it's not a regular time.
No,
so
it's not a regular time.
I would say it was I'm gonna be interesting to see how things normalize.
Yeah.
But
good. I mean, I'm glad that you are navigating the waters of this. And these challenges only make you a better, smarter, more strategic entrepreneur, because if it's not this today, it's something different tomorrow that you have to be prepared for and make, the best decisions for your business. To that, I'm curious, what is the next frontier for Kahawa 1893?
Oh, that's a good question. Any ideas? What do you want us to produce?
I actually love your portfolio a ton. I love your portfolio. I see that you have the single bags, and as folks return to work, I think return to life outside of the home, these types of convenience items that you developed in the first place for convenience are such a great idea. If you're going camping and you still want your great coffee, you can take that with you. If you're traveling, you still want that. If you're on the go and you need to drink it quickly in the car and you're like, I don't have time to brew, you can still have that. So I do think you have a really great portfolio right here. And as you grow, sometimes it's not about adding more products, it's about getting more people to see it. And I think in this case, it feels to me you're expanding your distribution, continue to make it more accessible for more people. Also telling, to me, it's your story, because that for me is what was so compelling. The coffee is great. It speaks for itself once you try it. The story behind the coffee really gives you the brand affinity that a number of brands would envy, and you have that, you've designed that so well. So I know what I would love to see is more storytelling around Kahawa. I would love to see more storytelling. I think your product portfolio is great.
Definitely. And I think, in the future, one of the things we'd want to do more of is we want to do like a ready to drink again, so it's ready to drink. Even
I saw your cold brew bag.
Yes. So we have that.
A ready to drink cold brew would be.
I know, it'd be delicious, but also more interesting. We want to do like more flavors that are appreciated by, not just like regular vanilla and
caramel.
So more flavors that are appreciated by the broader community.
That's a great one.
So that's something I'm excited about.
I love my coffee black, but I know a lot of people have to have flavors, and it is also nice to have something just a little bit different, particularly if you're bringing in something unique, something keeping that heritage in mind. Bringing something that really appeals to us that we haven't seen, like you mentioned. Even if it is vanilla, maybe it's vanilla from this region, so that it has that great combination to really complement your whole offering, your whole proposition.
No, definitely. But yeah, be on the lookout. Again, I think, yeah, for us right now, it's getting, to tell our story to more people and
Yeah.
just sharing, it's great coffee. Like you said, once you taste it, it's great. But we want to make sure that, more people learn about us and, want to just have more impact on the ground.
Love that. So I want to know, and we've talked about it throughout because that is such a thread of your story. What
Yeah.
does it mean to you to be Black on shelf, Kenyan on shelf? What does it mean to you?
I mean, it's incredible. It's not something I ever quite imagined would happen. So I think when it happened, it's one thing to just build a brand. It's another thing to have that brand with an African Swahili name on a major retailer. And so for me, it's, as I mentioned at the beginning, Africa is the leader in coffee production. We produce the best coffee, and we needed a brand to represent that history, to represent our contributions to it. And I'm glad that we now have a brand. And it's not even just about me.
Yeah.
It's about, what this represents in terms of the farmers that we work with, like celebrating their efforts, but also just, I get a lot of, letters from people about what this, inspires for them to know that this door has now been opened. This glass has been shattered.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, to me, it's a life-changing moment. It's not something I set out to do, but I'm just so excited each time I go in and see it on the shelf.
Yeah. How can people follow you and the
So
brand?
we are on social, Insta, Twitter, Facebook, at kahawa1893.com, KAHAWA 1893.
And we'll be putting those in the show notes so that you can all find out and follow and support. I challenge each of you to tip a farmer. She mentioned, Margaret mentioned $20 is transformative. So we're going with tipping $20 to a farmer. This donation goes direct to them. So it's really transformative, like we just said. And I'm excited that we actually have access to them directly.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much.
We're so proud of you. Love your coffee. We will be staying close to the brand so that we can support you as you grow your distribution. I'm very excited that we're able to have you on and to hear your story. And as we just talked about, watching for innovation, watching for the new flavors, supporting you in distribution and directly on your website, as well as the storytelling that will soon come about as we continue to tell the story. But, Boss Fam, you are some of our best storytellers. Share with a friend, tell someone else that you know, give it as a gift, drink it in the morning as your coffee pick-me-up. So these are ways that we can continue to support and experience Kenyan coffee. If you've never had it before, you won't be disappointed. So thank you, Margaret, for coming on. We are excited and look forward to continuing to see the success of your business.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah.